Good afternoon. Welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein. You just heard one of our KPFA announcers say something about changing the dial so you can be told what to think. And in this show, you're going to be told, this particular week of our show, you're going to be told something completely different from what you usually get told about how school districts are governed and what that means for the populations of the cities who live there and who gets to actually choose their school board and who doesn't. And some of it may shock you. Now, if you are from Oakland, it may not shock you as much because the Oakland School District was taken over by the state of California 22 years ago. And when this district is taken over by the state, that means the school board loses all their power, which means that the electors, that's the residents, lose all their power because they don't get to elect anybody. There's somebody put in charge. And in the case of Oakland, Oakland's debt could have been solved internally. That was not allowed by the state senator at the time, Don Parada. And the debt, the actual amount that the district needed, which they were not allowed to use their own money, was $30 million. But the loan that was imposed without the will of the people of Oakland was $100 million. And so these non-elected people got to spend $100 million on whatever they wanted because there was no participation by people in Oakland. I know it sounds shocking. It was shocking. And Oakland is not the only district. I'm going to name some others, and you all can think about what they seem to have in common. Some of the other districts, just a few, are Inglewood, Vallejo, Compton. Getting any idea where I'm going with this? They were not Moraga or Orinda. So the people who often have the least amount of input anyway because of inequalities and racism in our system get the little bit of participation that they have in schools, which is to elect a school board, taken away from them. There have been a number of districts that this has happened to, and people from Oakland will recognize that one of the results was the closing of, I believe it was 29 schools, mostly in African-American communities. So we have with us today, to bring this current, a representative from Sacramento, which in some ways has a lot in common with Oakland. We're pretty familiar with the diversity of the population. And you would think since it was in the state capital, maybe they wouldn't be facing these things. But they are, and our guest today is Taylor Kayata, who is a board member of the Sacramento City Unified School District. And I want to point out before I introduce him that he's also a CPA, a certified public accountant. So if somebody wants to say he doesn't know anything about money, that's not true. He does know about money, so maybe that will give even a little bit more credibility to his outlook and the things he has to say. So, welcome to Education Today, Taylor Kayata.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. So I'd like to start out just with a few things about yourself. So you have children in the Sacramento schools, right?
Yeah, I have two kids, both in elementary school still.
And your district is diverse, and so is your board? Is that correct?
Yeah, our district is diverse, yes. And we're not actually the entire city. So we have some of the wealthy parts of the city, but mostly we have a lot of the least affluent areas of the city as well as parts of the unincorporated county. So, for example, we're 40% Hispanic. We've got 70% are free and reduced price. We have 17% Asian, 14% Black. And more than 50 languages spoken in our district. We are a lot more than a lot of the homogenistic districts that you have kind of in the suburbs.
And you are, at this point, being pushed by some people to take a loan from the state of California. Is that right? And what is their argument?
Yeah, there's been pressure on my school district for over a decade now that there's a feeling that we're intrinsically broken, that we cannot manage our finances. There's a feeling that union pressures are strong and that that's a problem. And it reached a fever pitch a couple of years ago before COVID, where the state really felt like, okay, this is it. This is the time. We're going to get this district. And it really felt like that as a parent in the community. It felt like they're coming for us. And then within the past year, it's been a fever pitch. They're back at it again. And the pressure right now to accept a state loan is something that I'm not sure I could even describe.
So thank you for explaining that, and maybe try a little more to describe it. And what arguments can they possibly be making for why this would be a good thing? And who is it that's putting on the pressure? Is it some of the same people that have pressured other districts around the state to take loans? So just to be sure our audience is clear, if you take a state loan, the state takes over the district and they run everything. So taking a state loan is not like, okay, I'm going to go to the bank, get a loan, I'll pay it off in a couple of weeks. No, you take a state loan, and your district is under the authority of whoever the state puts in charge, and we'll get into that in a minute. So how are they pushing it? Can you say a little bit more about that?
So I will say under the current law, even though we still call it a state receivership, it's actually changed where instead of the state appointing someone, and I know you know this, it's actually the county superintendent who would appoint someone to run your district for you. And we have a county superintendent in Sacramento County who's been on the job for decades. And I will say it's been his mission, in my opinion, that something is wrong with Sac City Unified, that we are the problem child, and that we need outside control, that we shouldn't be running ourselves. It feels very problematic given that we represent some of the most, challenging to educate students and most expensive to educate students. But I think, this county superintendent just feels like you guys can't run it for yourself. And so the county, I think, primarily is the driver, but their close compatriot would be FCMAT, who has been at the heels of this district for as long as I've lived in the city. I didn't grow up here, but as soon as I moved up here, it became very clear FCMAT's watching us. The state legislature is watching us, and the powers that be that aren't tuned into our local, needs, they listen to the talking point, which is that we have board after board that, in their opinion, doesn't know what they're doing and can't properly balance community input with our needs, and they want to take control away.
So can you say a little bit more about, it's like, it's, I know about it, but it's so shocking when you say it that here you have this very diverse board and this very diverse population, but the county doesn't think you can take care of yourself. It seems so racist on the outset. It seems like everybody would scream and say, we can't do this. I mean, this is like, what our national administration is doing with setting up a civil rights committee with all white people on it. I mean, it's like, doesn't somebody point out that this is racist to say that the district that has the most diversity and the most diverse board can't run itself?
It does feel like that. And I think the outward pressure and a lot of the media has been of the opinion that we can't handle our narrative, and not maybe necessarily now, but 5 and 10 years ago, there was a very strong push by a lot of the media, a lot of the newspapers that people would read here, Sacramento Bee, for example, that this is perpetually an incompetent board and perpetually beholden to interests that are not focused on the stability of our district. It's inaccurate, it's improper, and it's statistically, in my opinion, impossible that board after board after board has a problem, rather than pressure from the outside being the ones that are not allowing the local community to speak for itself.
So that's the view of the county, and you mentioned FCMAT also. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about what FCMAT is about? This call is the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, and it's run out of Bakersfield. And I hope later on, when people aren't in their cars or whatever, people will look up the staff of FCMAT in Bakersfield and see the difference between the composition of the people in Sacramento and the composition of the staff that's running FCMAT. So can you say a little bit more about what FCMAT does, what kind of authority it has? Because you said they, along with the county, are also pushing to have you take a loan and be taken over.
Yeah, I mean, FCMAT is a creation of the state legislature that exists to make sure that the money that's flowing to local school districts is controlled and that we don't have districts that fail. In the past, there's been some districts that had very bad fiscal situations and the state had to step in. And so they want to avoid that because at the end of the day, the state can't not let kids get educated. It's a right that we all have to get our kids a public education. And in theory, something like FCMAT, where the state has someone who comes in and helps you when you are having a bad year or two, it should be a positive thing. But my experience and the experience of people in Sacramento has been that this is an outside agency that has its own motivations and its own political fights that are not just about helping you save your budget and helping you get through temporary lulls, but more about taking control over districts that it thinks shouldn't be running itself. And unfortunately, they have, they have a strong reputation among the policymakers who listen to them. And those same people are the ones who will discredit what they hear from local board members like myself, who are chiding with our community because we're not considered to be the experts. And the experts are saying, hey, these guys don't know what they're doing. When in fact, if you talk to us, you'll hear that it's unique problems in every district, but we just actually need assistance sometimes. We don't need control taken away.
And FCMAT, I should be sure our audience knows this, FCMAT is paid. This is not a volunteer job. Oakland paid them many millions of dollars. Along with paying off the loan, they also had to pay FCMAT for the service of being told what to do. So how do other members of your board feel? Are there people who feel that the board should take a loan and should not be, trying to resist that?
So, the board in Sacramento, every 2 years, it's a new board, right? We have new elections, and we have a rotating board, 7 members, 3 up every 2 years and 4 up the other 2 years. So, for the past decade or two, I would say some boards have gone back and forth on saying whether we need the outside assistance and we should be preparing for insolvency, as opposed to some boards that are very much in favor of we are tiding with our community and we should be calling our shots. The current board composition, all 7 of us are dead set that a loan is the absolute last thing our community needs. And whenever I talk to my constituents, whenever my fellow board members talk to their constituents, as soon as we explain what it actually means to lose control, the community is 100% behind us. That's not the answer. Whether or not we need help, they want us, and by virtue of saying us, it's them. It's the people's voice to be represented in their decision-making, not some outside appointed unrepresentative people, like you said, out of Bakersfield, who don't really understand what Sacramentans need.
And so you have a lot of community support. So your board members can know that the community is on their side. But a lot of school districts, and I have to say again, it's the school districts that don't have affluent people in them who have financial problems. That's logical, right? That's how America works. So districts that have a lot of money have, they have higher range properties. They have more people who can contribute money. There's a whole lot of differences between Moraga and Orinda and Oakland and Sacramento and Inglewood. So there are more financial problems, and also the students have more needs often, more actual needs, physical needs, and educational needs. So you probably do have financial problems of some sort, right? And so what do you propose to do about them if it's not to take a state loan?
So I will say, first of all, that our financial problems have been understood for years, but they've never been, in my opinion, as bad as FCMAT and some other, outside entities like the county would like to portray them. I think we definitely have lulls. We've definitely run very tight budgets. And so any sort of swings in state funding or the needs of our students do have big impacts. But at the same time, these are not challenges that we can't manage if we make the right decisions. And our board has been really dead set on the perspective that anything that an outsider could do to us, we can do for ourselves, but we can do it better. So we recognize that cuts need to be made if our budget is as bad as it appears, and it does appear very bad, but we will make those decisions ourselves. The real challenge we've had is that for the past 6 to 8 months since we've had FICMAT actively involved and we've had a county appointed fiscal advisor working in collaboration with FICMAT, we've been asking, hey, tell us what you think we should be cutting and we will do it because we would rather make the cuts ourselves than have you make them for us. And they are not giving us any options. They have been steadfastly focused on getting us into a loan. That is the only solution they've offered us is you need a loan. And that just seems disingenuous to me. When we are willing to make cuts, there's not a single recommendation that FICMAT has offered that we haven't accepted.
So they won't give you advice. That's what they're supposed to be there for, is to give advice. They won't give you advice. The only thing they'll do is take over. That's the only option.
That's how it appears to me. Yeah, that's the goal. And Mike Fine is the outgoing, CEO or director of FICMAT. And, we had him at a board meeting a couple months ago, and I asked him point blank, I said, Mike, is there something we should be doing that we're not? And he said, no, you've done everything you need to do since your current crisis became apparent. And I said, well, are there some questions we should be asking that we're not? And he said, no, you're just out of time. And that just seems like a defeatist attitude that is representative of a lack of respect for our community coming from these, statewide entities that are not concerned with the fact that our constituents, the people who live here and have their kids in our schools, want to have a say in the direction of their school district.
And out of time is like, when they took over Oakland, it took them 22 years to do whatever fixing they thought they did. So I don't know what it means to be out of time. I mean,
Right.
22 years is a long time. It's not like they had a real quick answer for any place that I know of. So do you feel in some ways that you're connected to what's happened to other school districts that have been taken over? Is that something that you feel is real? You want to say something about that?
It feels like there's a standard playbook of finding either urban school districts like Sacramento and Oakland or rural districts like Plymouth, for example. That was our most recent district to fall into receivership. And to present them a standard set of, this is what you have to do, this is who you have to listen to, and this is the only way to get it done. And there's one way to get it done, and it's our way, and if you don't like our way, we're not going to help you. I've talked to people who've talked to some of these outside advisors, and the consensus is that they feel like my school district is being disrespectful to them, when all we're doing is saying, well, give us another option. That option doesn't sound like the one that works best for our community. Let's work together and find another one. And if you don't accept what they want you to do, then you're presumed to be, incompetent, and that's in their mind justification that they have to come in, because the only competent response is to do what they've recommended.
Have you thought about, and you might not have, and if you don't want to comment on this, it's fine, but I've been thinking recently about trying to ask some of these other school districts if they would like to make this an issue in the statewide elections for, who's going to be governor or state superintendent of education or state senators. I mean, I don't know that they've ever been asked to take a position on FICMAT. Is that something you all have considered?
I will say, yes, I've definitely considered that, and I've talked to other board members about that, but it just feels nebulous to your average person who's a parent trying to get their kids off to school, get them off to soccer practice, get to their job, get to their second job. It feels really detached from the day-to-day reality of what they're looking for, which is just, I just want a school that I can send my kids to that I know they're going to get a good education. And when you have to explain it so deep, it's almost like you lose them. And they're like, well, how does this really affect me? And you have to go deep into the well, deeper than we're going to be able to accomplish in this half an hour on your program today.
Yeah.
And, if anything, I would say, in my opinion, it's explaining to people the importance of the county superintendent, because that really is the person who's tied into the state legislators in a way that local school board members aren't, and who has the ear of FICMET. And I think if people realize, hey, there's someone who you actually have control over. This isn't one of the many priorities the legislature has. This is really one of the primary responsibilities of a county superintendent. And these people are out there making decisions that can negatively affect your kid's education. Like, you need to pay attention.
That's really interesting, and that's become more the case over the years, I guess, as you pointed out at the beginning, that the county superintendent actually has the control. So are you getting anywhere with your county superintendent?
No. So
No.
our current county superintendent, he announced he was retiring last year, and they hired a new superintendent. The outgoing board did, before the new board members were sworn in, actually, last month. And the new superintendent is starting in September, so I am hoping to get to know her. Definitely hoping our superintendent of our district can create a strong relationship with her. But I would say one of the most paternalistic things that I've seen coming out of our county is that they are keeping the former superintendent on as kind of a co-superintendent for a year with the primary goal of helping us with our finances, is what they're calling it. But I think it's actually because he wants to be here long enough to make sure he can push us into receivership. And I'm saying that bluntly because I truly believe that that is his goal at this point. He's spent years, not working with our district, but really pushing a narrative.
So this is the old county superintendent is going to stay on for another year with the new county superintendent, so he can get the new county superintendent to get you all to give up your control of your district.
Right. So we have two very highly paid county people, and then we also have a very highly paid fiscal advisor who the county has appointed, and then we have FICMAT. We have all this money being circulated to try to tell us what we should be doing with our budget, when ironically, we actually tried to hire a consultant to help us with our budget locally, and the fiscal advisor on behalf of the county actually denied our ability to do so. That she rescinded our decision. So we're not allowed to actually take control of our own budget. Yeah.
So we're paying taxpayer money for FICMAT, two county superintendents, both of them working together to get you guys to get taken over, and a fiscal advisor to do what FICMAT says. And we're paying taxpayer money in Sacramento and around the state, and they won't let you hire somebody who could actually help you because they'd look specifically at your budget.
Right, and that's why I say it feels like a common playbook. For context, the chief budget officer we had last year was the former budget officer from Inglewood Unified. She left that district, and we hired her up at the recommendation of the county. We were trying to be good partners by accepting their recommendation. And then the fiscal advisor they brought in is the former fiscal advisor, also from Oakland. And the firm that we wanted to hire to help us with our budget was HYA, who Oakland is currently working with, and has been able to help them find ways to stay solvent and not fall back into receivership. So I think, it almost feels like a conspiracy when you lay it out like that. And these are, professional people, so I don't want to, put it that way, but it really feels like, they couldn't take Oakland back into receivership, so they're moving on to us. It's the same people.
Yeah, and it was a conspiracy in Oakland because, as I said at the beginning, Oakland had a $100 million loan imposed and had nowhere near, even if you thought that Oakland should have to pay a debt, nobody thought it was more than $39 million. So to take taxpayer money and give it to state-appointed people to spend however they wanted to with no elected school board, that's a conspiracy. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. Can you, we have just a few minutes left. I wonder if you could say anything about your long-term vision, either for the schools in general, educationally, or for the schools in terms of, recurring budget problems. Do you have a big picture of what you think should happen beyond winning these fights about continuing local control?
So I think it's, there's a lot of districts like Sacramento City where we are a landlocked district. We are kind of a low-growth, declining enrollment district, not rapidly declining, but, we lose students every year. We're not going to paper over our financial problems by continuing to have new people come in and sell houses at a higher property value. We're working within the confines of where we are. So there's going to be challenges with the budget in the long term. But I think we need to address that in a way that is community-driven, with the community understanding what it means, rather than accepting some blanket, quote-unquote, best practices, which often involve making dramatic, harsh cuts, things like closing schools without plans. And this is actually something that my district tried to do about a decade ago, because the local school board was getting pressure then that, hey, if you don't take action, you're going to fall into receivership. They closed a bunch of schools. And the schools they closed were largely in the areas that most needed a school to be in their community. Families that couldn't, drive their kid across town to a farther school. And you only save a couple $100,000 by saving a school, because at the end of the day, you still have to pay the teachers. But then, okay, you have one less principal, maybe one less office manager. That's not that much money saved, but we ended up losing a lot of students. So enrollment at that point took a dramatic dive. And so instead of saving money, we actually harmed ourselves in the long run. And that's the thing that we can address. It's not even just about local control. It's about working with your community. If you do need to make cuts, to make them in a way that makes sense, rather than just trying to save $1 this school year.
So that's kind of a wonderful prescription to me, that the community should have a lot to say, not only in the election of these various officials and of school boards, but in what happens in the schools specifically, people's own ideas about what should happen. We've been talking to Taylor Kayata. He's a board member at the Sacramento City Unified School District. Do you have any recommendations of things people should read or think about or do or look at if they're interested in this issue and how it affects all the districts in the state who are not affluent, ultimately have some of these issues? I named some of them, but there are others as well. So you have any recommendations of what people might do or think or read?
Yeah, I would say for your average parent with, school-age kids, or even your average property owner who's worried about the values of their home, pay attention to your local school district's budget. And if there are warning signs, start talking and engaging with your local elected school board to find solutions that work. Because if you identify solutions earlier, then you can fix them without the state feeling like they need to get involved. Then you can fix them in a way that doesn't have outside entities like FICMAT coming in and saying you have no options but to accept a loan. And if you stay involved, I think, we can avoid this even if we're facing challenges. And then I think it's like you said before, it's, engage with your statewide legislators, because the idea that every school district throughout the state of California has the same needs and the same challenges is just wrong. Districts like Sacramento, like Oakland, have very different needs, different student populations than suburban districts, than rural districts, and one-size-fits-all solutions are going to do harm to our communities that are least equipped to handle that harm.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show and for sharing your experiences, and also thank you for the work you're doing in Sacramento. I think it's wonderful that your board is determined to do what they were elected to do, which is to serve the people of Sacramento, not something else. So thank you so much. You've been listening, audience, to Education Today. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein. We'll be back again next week, and with my co-host also, Jaron Epstein. And thank you to our listeners, and have a good week. Bye-bye.
American historian, author, and leading scholar of racism and anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi.
People are facing real challenges in this moment. And what Great Replacement Theory convinces people that the source of your challenges are those other people, or those people who are strangers, or those people you already don't like. And I think that's what makes this theory so dangerous, because people's livelihoods are suffering right now at the hands of the super rich. And some of those people within the super rich are heavily financing politicians to tell people that they're suffering because of people who are suffering even more than they are.
Storytelling for social change, only on KPFA.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.